So I received criticism that the argument I was making that video games are generally sinful when you engage in them, just basically an automatic venial sin when you start playing a video game, were not grounded in Thomas and were Stoic. So I wanted to present the argument that the person presented opposing my position, and then a response. So, and I'll let you decide what you think about it. I think it's more compelling than you might think at the outset.
Now, just as weariness of the body is dispelled by resting the body, so weariness of the soul must be remedied by resting the soul. The soul's rest is pleasure. This is stated above in sections 25, 2, and 31, 1 to 2. Consequently, the remedy for weariness of soul must consist in applying some pleasure. This means slackening the tension of the reasoned study. Thus, in the Conferences of the Fathers 24-21, it is related of Blessed John the Evangelist. Some people were scandalized finding him playing with his disciples. He is said to have told one of them who carried a bow to shoot an arrow. The man did this several times. John asked him whether he could do it indefinitely. The man answered that if he continued, the bow would break. The Blessed John drew the inference that man's mind would break in a like manner. This happens if its tension were never relaxed. In fact, Thomas Aquinas says both excess of games is dangerous, but it is also sinful to not play games. His response to literally whether there is sin in lack of mirth or playing games is, I answer that. In human affairs, whatever is against reason is a sin. Now it is against reason for a man to be burdensome to others. This happens by offering no pleasure to others and by hindering their enjoyment. Let your conduct be guided by wisdom so that no one will think you rude or despise you as a cad. A man who is without mirth is not only lacking in playful speech, he is also burdensome to others. This is because he is deaf to the moderate mirth of others. Consequently, they are vicious. They are said to be boorish or rude. This is as the philosopher states, I think you found a way to literally strip out any good mention of leisure. You focused on a very specific problem in some games. Also, your video literally reads Stoic propaganda. It says it is St. Thomas Aquinas. You just move on. Prima secundae question 24 pretty much says the opposite of what you say about passions. This is true if by passions we understand only the inordinate movements of the sensitive appetite. These are considered as disturbances or ailments. But if we give the name of passions to all the movements of the sensitive appetite, then it belongs to the perfection of man's good that his passions be moderated by reason. Man's good is founded on reason as its root. That good will be all the more perfect as it extends to more things pertaining to man. Therefore, no one questions the fact that it belongs to the perfection of moral good. This means that the actions of the outward members be controlled by the law of reason. Hence, since the sensitive appetite can obey reason, this is stated above in section 17.7. It belongs to the perfection of moral or human good that the passions themselves also should be controlled by reason. The point you made was his reference to Stoic inaccuracies to understanding passions. The Stoics held that every passion of the soul is evil. They consequently held that every passion of the soul lessens the goodness of an act. This is because the admixture of evil either destroys good altogether or makes it to be less good. This is true indeed, if by passions we understand none but the inordinate movements of the sensitive appetite. ChatGPT is hallucinating way too often, it seems. You could almost say ChatGPT is against reason. St. Thomas Aquinas would consider that sinful as well then.
I will now give you a full forensic analysis of the commenter's argument, line by line. I will show you what he's actually doing intellectually. I will show why it matches Rahner, Schillebeeckx, or Balthasar perfectly. I will show where he misuses Aquinas through selective retrieval. I will show where he ignores Aquinas' own conditions and structure. I will show why my reading, which is strict Augustinian Thomistic, remains correct. First, this is what my critic is doing in method. His entire argument follows a predictable pattern. Step 1. He takes one positive Aquinas text about mirth or recreation. This is Eutrapelia, or the Conference of St. John and the Bow. Step 2. He treats that positive line as if it overrides the entire structure of moral theology. Step 3. He ignores concupiscence. He ignores disordered passions. He ignores the default danger of pleasure. He ignores the need for moderation. He ignores the necessity of subordination to reason. He ignores the need for ordering to God. He ignores Aquinas' own warnings that pleasure corrupts reason. He ignores the four wounds of nature. Step 4. He assumes human joy is basically good unless proven harmful. This is precisely the Rahner, Balthasar, or Schillebeeckx anthropological program. They take the most optimistic lines of the tradition, they inflate them into governing principles, then they treat classical negative lines as quaint, stoic, or psychologically outdated. That is exactly what he is doing. He is not reading Aquinas, he is scavenging Aquinas for affirmations of modern humanism. Second, he claims Thomas says it is sinful to not play games. This is totally false. This is the most egregious misreading. What Aquinas actually says in Summa Secunda Secundae, question 168, article 4, is that a lack of mirth can be a defect of personality. It is not a grave sin. It is not a universal requirement to play games. The text says, the boorish man is burdensome to others because he is deaf to their moderate mirth. This describes a lack of appropriate human sociability. This occurs in certain contexts. It is directed toward other people. This is when the mirth is moderate. This is when failing to participate becomes rude. It is judged by reason. It is governed by the virtue of eutrapelia. It is not a universal moral command to play games. It is not a command to joke. It is not a command to engage in mirth. It is not a command to have recreation in any particular form. It is simply this: a person can be rude, harsh, or unaccommodating if he never relaxes with others in appropriate social settings. This is exactly the sort of flattened, unnuanced, Rahner-esque reading I identified. Third, he quotes the good of recreation, but he omits the conditions Aquinas requires for it to be good. Aquinas does not say recreation is inherently good. He says recreation is good only when moderate. It needs fitting circumstances. It must be subordinate to reason. It must not be indecent. It must not be excessive. It must not interfere with duties. It must not become habitual. It must not be preferred to God. It must not corrupt the mind. It must not lead others into sin. It must not involve sinful content. My critic never cites any of these conditions, yet Aquinas states them explicitly. There are 3 points which require special caution. This is in Summa Secunda Secundae, question 168, article 4. He also says, excessive play is a sin, sometimes mortal, sometimes venial, also in Summa Secunda Secundae, question 168, article 4. He says pleasure above all things corrupts the estimate of reason. This is in Prima Secundae, question 34, article 1. He says not every pleasure is good. This is in Summa Prima Secundae, question 31, article 7. These are not side notes. They are the foundation of Aquinas' treatment of pleasure. My critic ignores the entire structure. He quotes only the soothing parts. This is the exact same methodology that Rahner uses. Rahner quotes Thomas's natural desire for God, but ignores the need for grace to elevate that desire. It is a selective anthropological reconstruction. It is not Thomism. Fourth, he claims I stripped out the good mentions, but he strips out the warnings. Aquinas' structure on recreation is this one. Rest is necessary. This is the premise. 2. But pleasure is dangerous. This is the counterweight. 3. Therefore, recreation is good only under strict rational custody. My critic takes only 1. He ignores 2. Therefore, he inverts 3. Again, this is the Rahnerian move. They identify a positive anthropological datum. They universalize it. They treat it as the lens for interpreting everything else. Meanwhile, they ignore concupiscence. They ignore moral fragility. They ignore the disorder of fallen delight. They ignore supernatural finality. They ignore the primacy of the last end. They ignore the necessity of virtue to govern pleasure. My argument is simply the classical one. Pleasure is good only when ordered. The enjoyment of finite goods is morally neutral only in the abstract, in the concrete. It is usually disordered unless cured by reason and grace. That is Augustine. That is Aquinas. That is Trent. That is the manuals. My critic rejects this entire structure. Fifth, the claim about Stoic propaganda is anachronistic. Aquinas explicitly rejects the Stoics. I know this. He says Stoics held all passions are evil. Then Aquinas rejects them. He distinguishes ordered from disordered passions. He affirms ordered passions as part of virtue. He condemns disordered passions as sin. My critic pretends that my analysis is Stoic when I simply reproduced Aquinas' sequence. Passions are good when moderated. Passions are evil when disorderly. Pleasure is good when coming from good acts. Pleasure is evil when coming from disordered acts. Recreation is good when moderate. Recreation is evil when excessive or indecent. There is nothing Stoic about that. Labeling my argument Stoic propaganda is rhetorical. It is not philosophical. Again, Rahner and Schillebeeckx often caricatured the manuals as Stoic, even though the manuals were derived from Thomas against Stoicism. My critic is recycling that trope. Sixth, his Prima Secundae question 24 point actually supports me. He quotes, "If we call passions the inordinate movements, then they lessen goodness." He also quotes, "But if we call passions all movements, then their moderation belongs to the perfection of man's good." This is literally my position. Passions moderated are good. Passions unmoderated are evil, which is what I said about video games. If the delight is moderate, subordinate, fitting, then it is okay. If the delight is escapist, excessive, displacing duties, addictive, then it is venial or mortal sin. He actually proves my point for me. He believes simply because passions can be moderated. Therefore, passions as experienced are typically moderate. This is false. Aquinas and Augustine say the opposite. Seventh, his entire argument assumes a modern anthropology. It is not a classical one. My critic assumes human delight is naturally ordered. He assumes human desire is normally trustworthy. He assumes recreation is good unless proven harmful. He assumes joy is inherently virtuous. He assumes play is morally positive in itself. He assumes human creativity is a participation in God automatically. He assumes it is sinful to lack mirth in a general sense. All of this is Rahner. It is Schillebeeckx. It is Balthasarian optimism about human desire. It is transcendental Thomism. None of it is Augustine. None of it is the core of Aquinas. None of it is the manuals. None of it is classical Catholic moral theology. Aquinas says, pleasure corrupts reason above all things. This is in Summa Prima Secundae question 34, article 1. How does my anthropology account for this? If pleasure corrupts reason above all things, how is recreation good unless proven harmful? He cannot square Aquinas with his view. Another text is, not every pleasure is good. This is in Summa Prima Secundae question 31, article 7. Do you reject this statement? If not, on what basis do you treat all recreation as good unless disordered? Pleasure is good only when proven rightly ordered, and the biggest one is, excessive play is a sin, sometimes mortal. This is in Summa Secunda Secundae question 168, article 4. Do you deny this? If not, how can you universalize positivity toward play without conditions? He cannot answer this without abandoning the modern anthropology he is using. Ninth, summary of what's happening. My critic is taking one Thomistic affirmation. He is universalizing it. He is detaching it from the structure of virtue. He is ignoring the conditions. He is ignoring concupiscence. He is ignoring the default danger of pleasure. He is ignoring supernatural finality. He is assuming a Rahnerian anthropology. He is projecting it back onto Aquinas. His entire argument rests on a post-1960s mindset masquerading as Thomism. My reading is faithful to Augustine. It is faithful to Aquinas. It is faithful to classical virtue theory. It is faithful to scholastic psychology. It is faithful to pre-Vatican II moral theology. His reading is faithful to Rahner. It is faithful to Schillebeeckx. It is faithful to Balthasar. It is faithful to Gaudium et Spes interpreted through transcendental Thomism. It is faithful to 1970s pastoral theology. My core claim is exactly right. Classical moral theology would not approve of video games in the modern form. This is not exaggeration. It is simply applying their principles consistently. Manualists routinely condemned secular novels. They condemned theater. They condemned ballet. They condemned opera. They condemned circus spectacles. They condemned mixed dances. They even condemned benign forms of recreation when they overstimulated the senses or wasted time. To imagine that a medium orders of magnitude more immersive, violent, sexualized, stimulating, and addictive would receive a lighter judgment is historically absurd. The neo-scholastics judged by structure. They did not judge by aesthetics. The key is this. They did not ask, is this particular performance okay? They asked, what kind of thing is this in itself, and how does it tend to affect the soul? And then they asked, what are the ordinary dangers? This is how they evaluated theater. They evaluated circuses. They evaluated novels. They evaluated public entertainment. They evaluated the early cinema. The universal pattern of judgment was this. This kind of thing tends to inflame passions and waste time. Therefore, it is morally suspect. It is ordinarily sinful unless strongly moderated. Video games exceed every danger they identified, by far. This is not the modern approach. The modern approach begins with optimism. Modern Catholics following Rahner, Schillebeeckx, or Herring start with this assumption. Human activities are fundamentally good unless obviously sinful. Thus, games are good, stories are good, entertainment is good, culture is good. One must simply discern the problematic elements. This is the anonymous Christian anthropology. It is not Augustine. It is not Aquinas. It is not the manuals. Classical moral theology begins from the opposite principle. Augustine, Thomas, Trent, and the manualists begin here because of original sin. Human delights are ordinarily disordered unless subordinated to God. They do not begin with pleasure is good. They begin with pleasure is dangerous unless ordered. This is exactly my framework. Imagine a common modern video game scene. The protagonist is a young woman dressed seductively but not too seductively, holding in her hands an automatic weapon that she uses to mow down angry-faced enemies by the tens. Anger turns to the despair of defeat on their expressions as they fall to the ground and blood pools around them. This example is common in video games today and not considered a moral issue by most young Christian men. It is decisive in that scenario. The neo-scholastics would respond immediately. A. The content is gravely immodest. This is due to the sexualized body. B. The content is gravely violent. This is murder as entertainment. C. The delight is disordered. This is pleasure in simulated killing. D. The medium is immersive and repetitive. It strengthens passion. E. The time spent is likely excessive. Thus, the conclusion would be immediate. This is objectively sinful. It is likely mortally so. It cannot be excused by recreational intent. There is no world in which Tanqueray, Prümer, Merkelbach, Ertnisdamen, or Joan would call this morally neutral. None. My point about discernment optimism is the exact difference between the two anthropologies. The modern approach says video games are fine, just use discernment. The classical approach says video games are morally dangerous as a category. Discernment will rarely salvage them. In most cases, it will simply not occur. This is exactly how manuals treated novels. They treated dances. They treated theater. They treated cinema. Video games are far worse in terms of sensory stimulation and moral danger. My final insight is the killer one. What would happen if they did not game? This is the test Aquinas and the manuals would actually use. If this time were not used for gaming, would the person be more disposed to prayer, charity, duty, or virtue? If yes, then gaming gives rise to opportunity cost. It causes distraction from the last end. It is a venial disorder. It creates a habit of dissipation. It causes imaginative colonization. It creates spiritual tepidity. Thus, Aquinas would say, this is at least venially sinful unless justified by clear reason.